Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers and dear students. First of all, Eid Mubarak to all of you. In today's video, we will discuss the remaining aspects of international terrorism. So, if you remember, we have discussed the pull and push factor of terrorism in our previous video, and now we will discuss some of the factors which support terrorism. And the factors are quite simple. They are known as the 4S model, or so now I'll explain what are the 4S. Number one is the slogan or the cause. Number two is the support of the people. Number three is the space of operation, and number four is the sponsor or financiers of armament. So these are the four factors. Now let us discuss these four factors one by one. Terrorism must have a cause or the slogan. Without a cause, without a slogan, the terrorist organization cannot strive, it cannot survive. In order to sell itself to the people, it must have a slogan. And usually these slogans are against the occupied forces, against the invaders, against a kind of a foreign policy. So these are some of the slogans of terrorism, and without the slogan, terrorism cannot thrive. Then there might be different minority groups, and terrorist organization might say that we are conducting these activities just to support those minority groups. So, but the slogan is there. This slogan, without a slogan, without a cause, terrorism cannot it cannot thrive. It cannot be a successful strategy. People will not buy it. So, in order for the people to buy it, these terrorist organizations, they come up with a slogan. Number second is the support. The second S is that of support. So, these terrorists, they need shelter. They need support of the people in order to operate freely, and they only get the support of those people for whom they would have raised a slogan, or they would have devised their cause. And at times they might be from within those people, within that community. They might arise from within that community, but their support is must. And without the support, these terrorist organizations, they cannot, again I would say, strive. They cannot thrive. You can take the example of many militias around the world which operate, and they have their support. They have the support of the common people. Take the example of the recent ISIS. So they are, on the face of it, they are asking for an Islamic caliphate, and that is why that it is popular among various section of society, of Muslim societies. But everybody knows that the prime objective of the ISIS is to kill Muslim even. But even then, they have gathered the support of a specific group, of a specific segment of the society, and now they are operating easily in different countries because they have got this support. So this support is necessary. This sympathy of the people is necessary with terrorism, with terrorists. Without this sympathy, they cannot operate easily. Then the third factor which we do have is that of the space. So terrorist organizations or terrorists, they need a space where they can operate. For the operation of their activities, they need this space, and this space is usually there with them, and then they operate within that space. And the main purpose of these terrorist organization is to create panic among the people who they target, and for that they need this space, and not only the space to live, from the live without the fear of being eradicated or eliminated. So that space is also needed for them. But then another space in which they can operate, they can carry out their activities, is also needed for them. They want to, usually they conduct small acts, but they propagate it, they display it. So with their small acts, they can create terror among a larger section of, or a larger segment of society. And in that space, this space might be rural space or urban space, but that space is required. So this is the third factor which supports terrorism. Then another factor which supports terrorism is that of the sponsor. So sponsorship is really necessary for terrorism. All terrorist activities, if you evaluate them, they would have a sponsor. That sponsor might be a global actor, that sponsor might be a regional actor, that sponsor might be a neighboring country. But the sponsor is there. Without the support of the sponsor, the financial support for the armament of that sponsor, terrorist organizations cannot survive. Terrorists cannot survive. So they need this sponsor. Take the example of, and then the sponsor is needed for tactical and strategic advices as well. So take the example of the Tamil Tiger, India was a sponsor of it. Take the example of Mukti Bahini, India was a sponsor of it. And there are many more organizations. Take the example of ISIS. So different international and regional actors are sponsoring it. So this sponsorship is, or the presence of a sponsor is mandatory for a terrorist organization to thrive. Now, what should be the strategy, the anti-terrorism strategies? What should be this? So commitment is required for them, commitment of the majority of the people and all the stakeholders involved, affected by this these acts of terrorism. The commitment by all them is required. And then this is a multi-dimensional approach. Terrorism is a multi-dimensional thing. So a comprehensive, holistic policy is also required. Without it, we might find it almost next to impossible to eradicate terrorism. This pull and push factor, which I have discussed in my previous video about terrorism, it needs a comprehensive policy, a long-term policy, and we will also discuss that in this video, inshallah. What are some of the measures which can be taken in order to eradicate terrorism, in order to counter terrorism? Number one is, a formulation of a vision or a legal framework. That is mandatory. A country should have a vision how to eradicate terrorism and what should be the legal framework for that eradication. A comprehensive terrorism, anti-terrorism or counter-terrorism policy should be presented, and this comprehensive policy should be a policy which would acknowledge and comprehend all of the causes of terrorism, which are causing this terrorism on that specific territory. So this comprehensive policy is needed, and then that policy should be implemented in the letter and spirit. Otherwise, the counter-terrorism measures would fail, and this counter-terrorism measure should be implemented at the state level, and then if there are units of the state, administrative units of the state, so these should be implemented at that level as well. Then there is another policy which is known as the carrot and the stick policy. So this carrot and stick policy should also be extended to counter terrorism. And what does it mean? That you should offer, a state should offer immunity to those who would give up arms voluntarily, and follow a policy of punishing severely those who would not give up in front of the state, in front of the power of the state. So the state should adopt this carrot and stick policy. So what will it do? That at one hand, it will punish the terrorist severely, ruthlessly, and on the other hand, it will have a window for those who would be somehow convinced by the punishment that they should not follow this strategy of this policy of conducting terrorist activities, and they should surrender and they should go back to the fold of the mainstream of the country. So this window should be open for those who would like to leave the terrorist organization, to quit terrorism, and it will what do you say? It will minimize the power of terrorists or the terrorist organization, because people, weak-hearted people, would leave that organization, would quit terrorism. So it will also be helpful in devising a policy of divide and eliminate or eradicate. So you are dividing terrorists by your policy of carrot and stick, and then the remaining are eliminated. Then the hearts and minds of the people where these terrorists they get support from, so the hearts and minds of those people should be won, so that the common people do not extend their support to the terrorist organization. That should also be part of that legal framework policy. It should be there should be a logistic material support should be provided to all those people who have been supporting the terrorist organization. And then there should be a document in which the lessons learned from the anti-terrorist or counter-terrorist measures should be shared in order to improve the policy and adopt a better set of policies and make some amends to that legal framework if needs arise for that. Then adequate and legitimate use of force should also be part of the strategy. Like, you should not, the state should not kill the head of the terrorist organization, because ultimately they would have to negotiate with the head of the terrorist organization. But they should focus on eliminating the second tier leadership of the terrorist organization, because this is the second tier leadership which provides support. So this second tier leadership of the organization should be eliminated. When the second tier leadership is eliminated, the third tier leadership, since they want to climb the ladder in that hierarchy, so what do they do? What should they do? That they would also help the state in order to get rid of the second tier leadership. And then so in this manner, this legitimate and adequate use of force should be there at the disposal of the state, and only then it can be eliminated, eradicated. Terrorist organizations can be eliminated or eradicated effectively. Then this 4S should be countered. The 4S which I have elaborated, like slogan, support, space and sponsors, this should be countered by the state. And what is like the slogans, a counter narrative should be adopted by the state in order to dissuade people from the support of terrorist organizations, because terrorist organizations, they do have a narrative with them and they sell their narrative. So the state should come up with a countering narrative, with a counter narrative to tell to the people and sell it to the people, so that the people's support is minimized for that terrorist organizations. And in this regard, opinion makers should be used, religious scholars should be used, media persons should be used, and then spokespersons of different state agencies should be used in order to counter the narrative of the terrorist. And then how to eliminate the support? Find and choke the channels through which they get this support, the material and the financial support for the terrorists. So the state should have this ability to find and then to choke all the supports which are there for the terrorist organizations, and through which this support is like oxygen for them. So if you find and if you plug this oxygen, this hole through which they get this oxygen, then they will succumb. They will not be able to survive. Then the space. So this space, or keep this space limited for the terrorist organization. So intelligence-based operations should be there, so that the space for the terrorist organizations to operate become limited less and less. So then you will confine them to a specific territory, and then it will be easy for the state to conduct operation against them and eliminate the remaining ones as well. But first of all, this space should be squeezed by the state. And then the sponsors, so all those channels should be plugged through which these terrorist organizations get their financial and military support. These channels should be plugged, and intelligence agencies should perform really well in order to plug these gaps. First of all, find these gaps and then plug it, or find the sources of support and then choke them. Then another aspect which should be very helpful in order to counter the terrorist organizations is that of improving the criminal justice system in the country. Because investigation and prosecution branches of the judicial system they are of immense importance. So they should be improved, the prosecution and the investigation process, so that whenever a case is built, it is built on strong evidence, on strong investigation, and then it is lodged in the judicial system, in the judiciary against it, in the court of law, and then it is tried, that the terrorists are tried and they are punished according to the under the due process of law. Then selection and appointment of all the police personnel, that should also be based on merit. There should be no political appointees in the police department of the state or of the provinces. Only then it will be, and then their constant capacity building courses should be introduced in the police department, so that they are able to effectively fight with the terrorist organizations when they are confronted, and then conduct these investigations and prosecution and everything. So it should be there. Without it, it cannot be there. Again, judges should be appointed on merit, because without the appointment of judges on merit, you cannot ensure that justice would be served whenever a terrorist is brought in front of a judge. But if the judge is appointed on merit, that judge will ignore all other factors, the fears, the threats, but he will only be focused on punishing that terrorist under the due process of law. Then high security prisons should be built. The security of the current prison cells should also be enhanced, so that the apprehended criminals or terrorists are unable to contact their friends, their like-minded people outside, or their leaders outside the prison cell. So this high security prison should also be formulated, made within the country. Then the sources should be plugged. What are some of the sources of terrorism? Number one is the poverty reduction. This is the source of terrorism. So it should be plugged. There should be a comprehensive policy with the government which should be solely focused on raising the living standard of the people in the country, so that they do not attracted to the slogans of terrorists, because the terrorist would tell them that, okay, you are poor, come join hands with us, we will give you this and this money per month, and you should fight on our behalf. So the person is unemployed, he needs to support his family, and this is how they attract him. So this thing should be plugged by bringing a comprehensive economic policy by the government, so that people do not slip into the fold of terrorist organizations. Then discrimination should also be curtailed, because this is discrimination which also pushes people towards the terrorist organizations, because they have a slogan. They say that it is justice for all kind of thing with them. And if the common masses see this discrimination, their slogans would be accepted. The slogan of the terrorist organizations or the terrorists would attract than the common people, because they are already observing discrimination on ground. So this discrimination on ground should be countered through legislative measures by the state, and only then people would not be attracted towards the terrorist organization. Then the government should also take measure to counter the hate literature, because we have a lot of hate literature even in our country, in Pakistan over here, and this literature is based on the caste, based on the creed, the color, so this or the sectarian lines. So this hate literature, it should be countered. It is not only specific to Pakistan, it is a general kind of thing, like the caste literature. It might be, you might find it over there in India. The color literature, the racism, you might find it over there in Europe. The white supremacist, they have got this literature with them. And in Pakistan, this sectarian line, this literature, hate literature on the basis of sectarian divide, or the fault lines, sectarian fault lines in the country, in the society. So this should be countered. And then government should have a proper mechanism to counter the fake news, because in today's world, in the presence of social media, which is a very powerful medium, and it is becoming powerful day by day, so fake news are generated, they are propagated, and they spread like a wildfire. So it should be countered by the government, this hate literature in this regard, so that the sentiments of the people are somehow normalized, brought under check. Okay. And then mainstream ex-terrorists, they are returning, or the returning foreign fighters, so they should be welcomed. If they give up their arms, they should be welcomed by their state. They should be provided a breathing space for them. Rehabilitation processes should be there for them, so that the terrorist organizations, the members of the terrorist organization, the fighters of the terrorist organizations who are fighting on ground, or their third or fourth level leadership, they should see this window for them, that if they return, they can be provided very good support by the state, and they would be rehabilitated, they would be reintegrated into the society. And then when these ex-terrorists, when they return, the state should use their knowledge about the terrorist organization in order to eliminate the whole organization easily. So the state should investigate them, they would cooperate them. Definitely psychologists would there for their psychosocial therapy. They would there, and they would dig out information from them, and then gathering much information about the organization they have been working for, and then they will be able to counter those organizations, to eradicate those organizations. So it is really important. It is really important. Then regional and global cooperation should be there. Without a regional and global cooperation mechanism in place, terrorist organizations cannot be countered, because they are transnational organizations. So if there is a comprehensive counter-terrorist policy, a comprehensive anti-terrorist policy in place in the region in which that terrorist organization is operating, or in place at global level, and all the countries, international actors agree on that policy, only then it will be a successful policy, because you will be eliminating that organization at once. It will not be the case that Pakistan has done its part in eliminating a particular organization like the ISIS, but India is not doing its part, and now it is thriving in India. It is a fact that it is thriving in India. Recently, international media, it just broke a news, it just informed with the news that ISIS has got a headquarter in India. So what is it doing? It definitely means that India is not utilizing or it is not willing to utilize its force in order to counter that organization. And then we can see that who is using it against whom then? Definitely, if the head office is there in India, they should take action. Otherwise, the international community should ask India to do more, because this is a threat not only for the region but for the whole world. ISIS is globally declared terrorist organization. So it is this global and the regional cooperation should be there. Otherwise, if this cooperation is not there, states would find it really difficult to eliminate the terrorist organizations. Well, so these were some of the measures. As far as this pull and push factors, countering the pull and push factors of the terrorist organizations, or the push and pull factor of terrorism, they are long-term strategies. So these long-term strategies should also be adopted by the state, like the counter narrative should be there, but this is a long-term strategy. You just start giving up a counter-terrorist narrative or a countering narrative, but then it will take time for the people to accept it, and consistency is provided there in order for that narrative to become popular among the people, and then accept it, and then stop following the other narrative or stop buying the other narrative. So these push and pull factor, they are long-term strategies, but they should also be adopted right on the onset of terrorist activities, or whenever a situation arises, but right from the onset they should be adopted, these long-term strategies. And then the short-term strategies like plugging the sources and this and that, so they should also be adopted. Well, there now, just to give you the final words on this topic, that though there is ambiguity on the definition of terrorism, but there is no ambiguity by calling acts of terrorism as acts of terrorism. So this should be, they should rather than in getting involved in coming up with a comprehensive, universally agreed upon definition of terrorism, they should just, these countries should just come up with a comprehensive policy and based on the terrorist acts, and see these acts. So this coordinated effort is required by the states. It should be there. Otherwise, terrorist organizations cannot be eliminated. Terrorism cannot be eliminated, and all the efforts done by the states in isolation will not bring any fruit, will not bear any fruit for the international community, and we would see these terrorist organizations thriving and striving and threatening the security, the internal security of different states. So this was all from my side on this topic. Inshallah, I will talk to you in the next video about a new topic. Up till then, take care. Allah Hafiz.